Good morning, friends and enemies. We are diving into the Week 3 waiver wire every single Tuesday morning, as we always do, going through the trending tab of players being most picked up, players being dropped. I'm going to tell you who I like, who I don't like, guys that I think you can get off your roster at this point into the season. I think this week is a big week to let your idiot league mates drop the clip on the fab. I said this in the live stream yesterday. Every Monday I go live and go game by game through recaps, so make sure you're subscribed and you got notifications on if you want to hear me yap about the games. But this is pretty much a week of picking up the scraps from last week. If there are still guys available, most of them doubled down and played well again. You have the elic ayomanors, you got the Juwan Johnsons, the Harold Fannins. All the guys that we liked last week ended up just playing well again in this week and just doubling down on the fact that, yes, they need to be owned. And then you add in like 1, 2, or 3 extra guys this week that I don't think we need to be spending any sort of number one waiver wire clip on or the fab budget on or anything like that. But we will go through the trending tab as we always do. Let's tuck our shirts in. Okay, on the left side of the screen here, you will see the trending up tab. These are the guys that are trending. They're the most added right now. We'll start with the quarterback position. This is not a streaming episode where I talk about who you should be streaming in one quarterback leagues, but there was a lot of quarterback mix-up this week, obviously, so I do want to talk through this in terms of the guys like Jake Browning and Carson Wentz and those injuries to the quarterbacks, especially those that are affected, deeply impacted, like myself, in Superflex League. So we have Joe Burrow basically out for the fantasy season at least, and Jake Browning is going to step in. Now, Jake Browning made, it was like 8 starts back in 2023. And he had some good games. In 4 of the 8 starts, he threw for 275 passing yards. So they're going to let him rip. I think they're going to have high pass attempt totals. Like Chase Brown, very, very involved, but they're not having a lot of rushing success on the ground. Part of that is due to the offensive line. They're also in game scripts where they just need to pass the ball a lot because their defense does not hold teams to low totals, obviously. My one concern is just their upcoming schedule here. You know, they play at Minnesota, they're at Denver, Detroit, at Green Bay. So, like, their next 4 games are really, really tough. The problem is if you're a Joe Burrow owner in a Superflex league or you had J.J. McCarthy or whatever, like, and you were playing these guys, you need a QB2. So, Jake Browning would be the top pickup this week in a Superflex league because you're going to have him for the next, 12 to 14 weeks, again, for the remainder of the fantasy season. Most likely. He's got great weapons. He's going to have very high pass attempt totals. So while I'm not like, I hate it as a Chase owner, like Jake Browning will probably end up being, the quarterback 18 to 24 over the next 3 months. So he's someone that if you really need him, like, sure, go out and drop the 25, 35, 45% of your fab if you're in a Superflex league that's very competitive and you need that extra quarterback. I wouldn't do so if, like, you have a rosterable quarterback 2 and he's going to be your QB3 and most likely see the bench. But, like, again, I get it. I feel for the Superflex homies out there that need him. You got to do what you got to do. Carson Wentz is a little bit trickier because you got J.J. McCarthy expected to be out somewhere from 2 to 4 weeks with a high ankle sprain. Now, their schedule, they play Cincinnati. So for like 1 week, Kevin O'Connell can turn any quarterback into a fantasy god, right? So I actually like Carson Wentz for this little 1 week span. Get him in, get him to play Cincinnati. He can put up some numbers. Aaron Jones is going to be out for this game most likely, so they might have to go a little bit more pass heavy than intended. But we've seen him do it with Nick Mullins. We've seen him do it with Josh Doubs. Like, we've seen Kevin O'Connell turn quarterbacks into something that they are not statistically. So Carson Wentz I like for 1 week. The problem I will say with Carson Wentz is, again, J.J. McCarthy's injury, 2 to 4 weeks. They play Cincinnati. After that, they're Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and those games are abroad. So they're playing Pittsburgh in Ireland. They're playing Cleveland in England. They got back-to-back games where they are over the pond over there, which I don't like starting players that I don't have to in games abroad. Like, those are typically messy, especially the first week of the 2 where the team is traveling. The travel schedule is all messed up. Like, Carson Wentz now having to prepare to be a starter on short notice while traveling abroad in a week and a half just feels kind of like a stay away to me. Cleveland's defense, I think, is relatively good despite what they showed against Baltimore. And then they have the bye in week 6. And after that bye, I'm assuming J.J. McCarthy will be back. So you got good matchup against Cincinnati. Then you got 2 games abroad, which I'm like not excited to get Carson Wentz really in my lineup for that. So I wouldn't be surprised if he had a good showing in week 3, but another one that I would temper expectations if you're in a super flex league, just given what the next few weeks looks like. The other 2 quarterbacks you kind of have to have on your radar in super flex leagues would be Tyrod Taylor, because Justin Fields is in the concussion protocol. 50-50 chance he just misses this game straight up while still maintaining the concussion protocol. And secondly, there's a chance that if he doesn't practice all week, that Aaron Glenn just thinks it's a better idea with Tyrod getting a week of practice to prepare for Tampa Bay that they just want to start him over Justin Fields on the short week here. So Tyrod on the radar, obviously. Marcus Mariota could be filling in for Jaden Daniels against the Raiders. Jaden Daniels is apparently day-to-day with some sort of minor knee sprain. It happened on Thursday, so he does have 10 days of rest to get ready for their game against the Raiders. So that's one that you're just going to kind of have to wait on news for and see what happens going forward. So before we move on to the running backs real quick, we do have a sweet promo offer for you guys. Like, I do these waiver rankings. They're live right now on the site, bdge.co, where I actually rank them. I give you my direct fab suggestion, who I would take over the other guys. That's part of the Big Dog membership. Waiver wire rankings. We have our weekly rankings, of course, whether you're in PPR, half PPR, looking for flex starts, running back starts. And then every Sunday morning, 11:30 a.m. Eastern time, I do a private Q&A where you guys can ask me any sit starts that you might have for your particular lineup. Those are perks of the Big Dog members. And thanks to our partner, MGM, you can get access to that for virtually the remainder of the season for just $10. If you go onto their app or website and you deposit $10 using code BIGDOG, BIGDOG, play a slip on that site. They're going to send you a promo code to enter into our site, BDGE.co. That will get you the Big Dog membership for free for the next 3 months. All right. So in honor of Joe Burrow's absence, you'll get 3 months free. All right. Code Big Dog. Play anything on there. They'll send you a promo code in app. You could use it on our website. If you're already a Big Dog member, this works too. They'll send you the code and you can enter it into your My Account page on the website. So you could stop paying for the next 3 months. All right, let's move into the juicy shit. And as always, I'm not going to dive into guys that are like really highly owned and owned in most leagues. But the trending tab will put you in the right direction of guys that are looking to be picked up. So you have bhayshul Tuten at the top of the list here, 45% rostered. He obviously had a good game in this previous week 2 against Cincinnati where he got into the end zone. He's getting more carries. We saw his snaps really take a big uptick now that Tank Bigsby is out in Philadelphia. He looks like a dude. He moves really well. He's very fast. He's very explosive. We knew this about him as a prospect. That's what he was in college. I will say the two things that I'm like a little bit skeptical about is Tuten. He absolutely needs to be owned, right? And he's a guy that I would probably put somewhere between 6 to 12% of fab on because he's a very high-end handcuff. Like, if something were to happen to Travis Etienne, Tuten becomes like such a real playmaker in fantasy football. But that's one of the issues is Etienne is playing really well. So I don't know where this split ends up to the point where Tuten is like startable on a week-to-week basis in fantasy. The other reason why these running backs have looked so fucking good in the first 2 weeks is they've had the single 2 best matchups you can have. They play Carolina in week 1 and Cincinnati in week 2. It just doesn't get much better than that. So any running back duo or single running back is going to look really good in those matchups. So I also don't want to like go crazy about the expectations of what we're going to see. Like, they play Houston next week, where I expect the Jacksonville passing offense to look a lot worse than they did in weeks 1 and 2. But Tuten's a guy that absolutely needs to be owned because of what his upside could be if something were to happen to Etienne. You know, in a pinch, if they're in a good matchup, like, you could flex him because he's probably going to be involved in the passing game some. And I'd imagine he's earned probably, 5 to 8 carries per game going forward. Blake Corum got his like highest workload, I guess, of his career. He got like 5 carries, played on 30% of the snaps, and people are kind of losing it. He's just the clear handcuff to Kyren Williams right now for me. The player that's not on here that obviously needs to be talked about is Woody Marks. So Woody Marks came into Monday Night Football last night. They played against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Dameon Pierce was a healthy scratch after playing in week 1. And Woody Marks also jumped Dare Ogunbowale for that pass-catching role. So right now, Woody Marks seems to be second in line on the depth chart behind Nick Chubb. And Nick Chubb looks fine. Like, he doesn't look anything like what previous Nick Chubb was, but he looks like a guy that could get some carries and be okay in the right situation. But he still looks a little bit robotic. He still looks a little bit stiff. He still looks a little bit like a Javonte Williams, maybe even like a watered down version of Javonte Williams at this point. And this is still an offensive line that's not good at all. They're not having a lot of success moving the ball on offense whatsoever. It's a pretty stale offense. Last night, Nick Chubb still outsnapped Woody Marks 26-13. Nick Chubb even ran more routes. He's just running more routes because he's in on more snaps, obviously, but 9-8 there. But it was still good to see Woody Marks jump over Dare Ogunbowale, Dameon Pierce be a healthy scratch. Woody Marks is, in my opinion, a very uninspiring runner of the football. Really good in passing downs. Like a really, really good pass catcher, a good pass blocker. That's what he did great at USC in college. But he's not elusive. He's not very big. His yards after contact metrics are not good. He's not really athletic whatsoever. So he's like a very, very, very average to below average guy in terms of the marks when it comes to running the football. And that's where I think his upside is kind of capped there. Like, I don't see a world where he becomes a workhorse, But I mean, they do need to inject some sort of playmaking ability into this offense outside of Nico Collins. So Woody Marks, again, needs to be owned here, but I'm not going to go crazy. He had a nice 37-yard catch and run last night, and I think you'll see him be more integrated into the passing offense. But I do just question this offense right now, again, just looks really stale. I don't know what the upside is there. I don't see a world where he's, a 60% snap guy. Like, he's not a very, very good runner of the football. So wouldn't use a number one waiver wire on him. In the fab range, somewhere in like 3 to 10%, depending on what your running back needs are. I do think he's got some PPR upside over the course of the season. Like, we could see this get to a 55-45 split maybe, and Woody Marks is more involved in the passing game and catches 3 to 4 passes per game, and you could definitely do worse than that, but he's not particularly my cup of tea. Chris Rodriguez is on here because Austin Ekeler obviously tore his Achilles. I do think most of that pass catching work ends up going to Jeremy McNichols, so I would much prefer McNichols to Chris Rodriguez. That being said, like, I don't think anyone was trying to start like Austin Ekeler, and now you have McNichols coming in. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. I guess you can own McNichols. Like, maybe he gets more running work. I do think he might be a better like runner than Austin Ekeler is at this point in their respective careers. So maybe there's a little bit of untapped upside that we're not giving McNichols credit for. But I do think Rodriguez being active might actually scale that back, and he might get some early down work. And we don't really know where the goal line situation is going to end up going between Jacory and Chris Rodriguez and Jeremy McNichols, but I would take McNichols over Chris Rodriguez for the pass catching work, and that's really it. And he's not on here, but he needs to be mentioned, although he's probably like very highly rostered. I don't know what his percentage is, but Cam Skattebo is kind of taken over as the one in the Giants offense. That happened a lot quicker than we thought, right? He missed most of August with a hamstring strain, but by week 2, he is now playing more snaps, running more routes, seeing more carries, getting the goal line carries in the New York Giants offense. That last part, important. It's a New York Giants offense. Monster game against Dallas, but we also saw what the floor of their team is in week 1 when they were playing against Washington. So it's going to be a committee. Tyrone Tracy still caught 4 to 5 passes. He's still a very good pass catching back. I don't think he'll be completely phased out because he's a good player. But Cam Skattebo brings this like intensity to the field that impossible to duplicate there. So Cam Skattebo needs to be owned. It looks like going forward, based on anything that happened in week 2, it's like you're starting Skattebo over Tyrone Tracy. Although I don't really feel comfortable starting either outside of great matchups. Moving over to the wide receiver position, and you have arguably the number one ad for the week, and that is Troy Franklin up there. Now, with Troy Franklin, I talked a little bit in depth about this in the game-by-game recap video yesterday. So he had a really big game, obviously, 9 targets, 8 catches, 89 yards, had the touchdown, played on 83% of the snaps, and that's important. Like, the role is as important as the actual production is. He ran more routes than Courtland Sutton. I don't think that means Courtland Sutton is the 2 there. I think it means that Troy Franklin is likely just the clear wide receiver 2 behind Courtland Sutton now, is going to run a lot of routes. Now, we've seen this before from Sean Payton and this Denver offense where like he has these 1 to 2 week infatuations with certain players and they get this uptick and they have big plays and it's like, oh shit, is there something here? And then there's usually not something there. I do think I like Troy Franklin more than any of those other like one-off little weekly spikes that we've seen before. Troy Franklin and Bo Nix obviously have the college chemistry out there. I will say for Troy Franklin, going back and watching the game, I don't want to take any credit away from him. The few things I'm looking for is like when I see a random spike week like this, it makes me think of like, oh, is this a Marvin Mims type of spike week where he didn't really do much. He just kind of happened to be right place, right time, caught a deep ball that like spiked his usage. And I will say there was a little bit of that from Troy Franklin. He looked good running routes. He looked explosive. It's the best we've seen him look on an NFL field for sure. He got 4 screen targets in this game, which obviously elevates your PPR floor. And he had a really big play on kind of like a broken defensive play downfield that was like a 40-yard catch. So there was some elevation in the production based on things that I don't necessarily think are like super predictable week over week. I do think he's still a relatively low floor play, but he could be like a low floor, high ceiling guy, boomer bust type of guy. If he's going to get all these screen targets that like Marvin Mims was getting, if he becomes the preferred deep option for Bo Nix, what you can obviously see in this offense is they really badly need a number 2 weapon behind Courtland Sutton because Evan Ingram's not really panning out. Marvin Mims is Marvin Mims. Pat Bryant's a 3rd-round rookie, so he might take some time to develop right now, and that's just leaving the door open for a dude like Troy Franklin who took advantage of it in week 2. So he's someone that, yeah, if you need wide receiver help, he's a high upside guy that I think is like definitely worth spending some fab dollars on. Again, not one that I would go like over the moon for, not one that I'm spending 30% of my budget on, not one that I'm using the number 1 waiver wire on, because at the end of the day, it's Courtland Sutton. This is probably going to be a very running back centric offense still. I think Troy probably deserves somewhere in the 8, 10, 15% fab spend if you're being competitive about getting a wide receiver. And the rest of the guys are all guys that we talked about last week that are, again, just leftovers. Like Romeo Doubs will have an increased role now that Jayden Reed is sidelined for the next 6 to 8 weeks. So I think Romeo Doubs has a nice PPR floor in that Packers offense. Wan'dale Robinson, I mean, we know what Wan'dale Robinson is. Elic ayomanor looks good again, scores a touchdown, has as many targets as Calvin Ridley. So he would actually be my number 2 pickup behind Troy Franklin on the week if he's available in your league. Hunter Renfrow, I think as soon as Jalen Coker comes back, he's probably not really a thing. In deeper leagues, Dontayvion Wicks, for the same reason that we just brought up with Romeo Doubs. Like, Wicks is obviously kind of like the laughing stock of fantasy because that motherfucker, every time he gets an opportunity, he just drops every pass. But he's capable of high ceiling games, and this is as good as this Packers team has ever looked under Jordan Love. So Wicks will probably play a much bigger role now that Jayden Reed is out. He played 65, 70% of the snaps in last week's game once Jayden Reed went out. So I think Wicks is like a deep stash here. Kayshon, boutte, if he's still available in your leagues, would be a guy that I would take above, like Wan'dale Robinson would be a guy I'd take above Dontayvion Wicks for sure. The other guys I'm kind of stashing right now, like I'm still stashing Tory Horton out in Seattle. He had a nice touchdown in week 2, but still running fewer routes than Cooper Kupp. But we'll see how that progresses as the season goes on. I want to stash Isaac Teslaa just because he makes sick plays and he's like really cool, but he's really not running that many routes, and there's just very little involvement for him in the offense, unfortunately. Moving over to tight end. Yep, same shit as last week. If Juwan Johnson is available, he's a must pick up. Harold Fannin needs to be owned. Zach Ertz, still one of the most underrated assets in fantasy football right now. Most of those guys are probably owned in your league, but if not, I look at Juwan Johnson and he's a very key part of their offense. Like, he's getting targets in the first quarter, the second quarter. It's not all garbage time shit. And this is a team that's playing from behind and in a Kellen Moore offense that runs a ton of plays. They are averaging 68 plays per game through 2 weeks, which is an insane number. So those target totals that him and Olave are getting on a weekly basis, 10 targets per game, seems like it's relatively sticky. Maybe not to that degree, but like close. Harold Fannin Jr., kind of the same thing. Like, he only had 5 targets in this one, but he turned it into 5 catches for 48 yards, which is a fine PPR day for a tight end. Joe Flacco attempted 45 passes. So the target share was only around 11%. So it came down. Again, when you're running 72 plays per game, which the Cleveland Browns are at right now, like, the passing volume negates any efficiency or target share or target rate concerns that you might have for a player. So I think all of these tight ends outside of Michael Mayer here are viable options. And then quickly, defensive streamers for the week. We love Buffalo versus Miami. They're huge favorites. We like teams that are at home. We like teams that are heavy favorites. So I think Buffalo versus Miami is a great streaming option. Seattle versus New Orleans, a great streaming option. Tampa Bay versus the Jets, a great streaming option. And then my Falcons at Carolina. We are 5.5 point favorites. Our D-line looking scrappy as a motherfucker. So I like Atlanta down there as a streaming option as well. All right, so we got the trending down right now. Calvin Austin, I mean, like, this has to be your first year ever if you really thought Calvin Austin was going to be a thing. Like, come on now. Austin, sure, hold him, drop him, I don't care. I probably am not using a roster spot on him. Michael Mayer, definitely droppable. Eckler, of course, droppable. Evan Ingram, like, I don't necessarily know that I want to drop him, but I will say, like, all of those free agent tight end guys that I just talked about, Juwan Johnson, Harold Fannin, I am rostering and starting all of them over Ingram. So at this point, it feels like you have to have a pretty deep bench and some luxury spots open for you to hold on to a guy like Ingram. Andrews, I feel like I could say the same thing with him, although I am literally rostering him and started him again in week 2, but none of those tight ends are available in my league right now. So I'm not sure what I'm doing. Like, I look at Andrews and target share is terrible. The air yards are terrible. Like, Isaiah Likely's been out, so this should have been a time where he could take advantage of it. I will say he dropped the touchdown last week, also had some other play action plays that were designed for him. So I think he easily could have gone 3 for 25 with 2 touchdowns in last game, but like, you're not really trying to bank on that. You need some steady production in PPR. So listen, I'm personally not going to drop Andrews, but I really don't blame anyone. Again, if those other guys were available, like in my league right now, the one that I have Andrews in, if Juwan Johnson, if Harold Fannin, if those guys were available, I would take them and start them over Andrews for sure. Jayden Reed, throw him in your IR if you can. Ollie Gordon, yeah, I mean, I think he's droppable. He's just in that handcuff tier of guys. Like, just play fucking, whack-a-mole, Russian roulette. Like, if you want to roster him, you want to roster the next guy that if the guy ahead of him gets hurt, then cool, you got a good waiver wire pickup. But it's just a pure luck thing at this point. Brenton Strange, I think, is droppable. Tank Bigsby's behind Saquon, but like, yeah, I don't think you need to roster him. Khalil Shakir, absolutely don't drop. Jaden Higgins is a tough one. I honestly, I love the early draft capital. He's just not running a ton of routes. Only 1 catch, 1 target last night. And again, it's almost more of a product of how clunky this Houston passing offense looks right now. It's very hard to have confidence in anyone there. So if you need to get rid of him, if you need to cut bait, I don't necessarily blame you, but I'd prefer to hang on to him if I could. Jadon Blue, I think, is droppable. Do not drop Darnell Mooney. I would hold on to Jonnu Smith. Damian Pierce is definitely droppable. Colson Loveland, another one that falls into that tier where I don't want to drop him, but I would take any of those free agent guys over Loveland right now for sure. Mims is droppable. Absolutely don't drop Matthew Golden. Luther Burden, I think, is another one where you can hold on to if you want. He's kind of like a handcuff wide receiver, and I would prefer to hold on to him because I do think he has some upside in this offense. But if you need the room, you can get rid of him. Gainwell, you can definitely get rid of. Braylon Allen, again, take your pick. He's just a guy that you're holding on to who's got some upside if the guy in front of him does get hurt. Waller, of course, you could drop. Adam Thielen, yeah, I think Jordan Addison is going to be back after week 3, so you could definitely drop him if you need to. Pacheco, he's a guy that you're going to roster. I just don't think you can drop Pacheco despite his horrendous performances so far. Brian Robinson, you're holding on to. Sampson, I think you have to hold on to Sampson right now until we see this running back room kind of like even out and see what the roles actually are between Judkins, Ford, and Sampson. Emmanuel Wilson, yeah, I mean, you could drop him. He's a handcuff. Teslaa, I named him in the guys that I would pick up, but I also am fine if you dropped him. Keon Coleman, do not drop. Najee Harris, after last night, after the fumble from Amari and Hampton, and Najee Harris seeing as many carries as him, later in the game, he's definitely like a high-end handcuff to hold on to. Christopher Rodriguez, I might want to hold on to the Washington running backs, whatever one's on my roster right now, just to see how this backfield plays out without Austin Eckler. Roschon Johnson, I have him in this league. I'm probably going to... I mean, it was his first week back from injury. He didn't play at all. I kind of want to see if they move any rotation in Chicago. Like DeAndre Swift, I think has been good, but I don't think he's been great. I don't think he's been good enough to stave off someone who might play well. So I'm going to hold on to Roschon likely for one more week and just see what happens in that backfield. All right, so that is week 3's waiver wire. That will be happening every single Tuesday morning for y'all. All right, so make sure that you subscribe to the channel. Tomorrow will be our full running back rankings. Thursday will be our wide receiver rankings where we go game by game, snap by snap, play by play, letting you know whether or not I would sit, I would start, I would flex every single fantasy relevant running back or wide receiver. So make sure you're subscribed for that. Hit the button that looks like this down below and make sure to go check out the Big Dog membership, bdge.co, through our partner offers page.